"No, don't take me to the sorcerer, don't kill my child." The anguished cry echoed across the Mississippi Delta, where the moonlight shimmered on the thick, black swamp waters. A pregnant mermaid, her golden scales glistening, was bound tightly against the trunk of an ancient tree. The men surrounding her shouted wildly, drunk on liquor, dreaming of wealth bought with blood and despair. In the shadows, Naomi stood frozen. She, a single mother, abandoned by her husband, raising twin sons born with disabilities, was witnessing a scene that mirrored the torment of her own life. That plea for mercy did not come only from a mythical being. It was the very echo of her soul, the buried cry for help she had carried for years. But tonight, would Naomi dare to do what no one else in the village ever had the courage to do? Set the pregnant mermaid free? The night drums of frogs echoed from the Louisiana swamps like the heartbeat of the land itself. In a shabby wooden shack by the Baton Rouge River, Naomi turned over, the rickety bed groaning beneath the weight of another endless night. The fading glow of a dying oil lamp swept across the rough planks, revealing cracks where the night wind often slipped through. Beside her, her twin boys, Malik and Micah, lay curled beneath a frayed blanket. Since birth, their tiny legs had never truly touched the ground. The steps other children took for granted remained, for them, only an unstarted dream. Naomi had grown used to lifting them, one on each shoulder, carrying them forward like the burden of her very life. Her husband? He had vanished long ago, leaving Naomi in the flood of responsibility. At first, neighbors muttered, "That man is no good." But like everything else in a life of poverty, they soon forgot. Only Naomi remained, her calloused hands scraping together each meal, each sip of clean water for her boys. That shack was poor, but it never lacked love. Every night, Naomi told her sons the stories her grandmother once told her, tales of the Mississippi, of the spirits that lived in its waters, of mermaids whose scales shone like gold, as if to remind them that even in hardship, magic could still be kindled. Malik and Micah always listened wide-eyed, swallowing each word even when sleep pulled them away before the stories ended. But when the lamp went out, reality returned harsh and unyielding. Damp earth, a sagging roof, the sound of rats gnawing corn husks in the corner. Naomi could only sigh. She had once dreamed of a sturdy home, of a husband to share the burden, but now all that remained was the crushing weight on her shoulders. That morning, as always, Naomi rose before dawn. The swamp wore its thin veil of mist, its damp musk mingling with the sour scent of river weeds. She lifted the empty water jug onto her head, the motion so practiced it seemed part of her body. The path through the Baton Rouge swamp was never easy. Bare feet sank into the soft mud, each step tugged back. But Naomi was long accustomed. She often joked to herself that if there were a contest for the fastest water bearer in the South, she would surely win. A hint of humor was her only shield against the bitterness of each day. That night, the stars were gone. The lingering moonlight shimmered on the water like scattered coins. Naomi quickened her pace, eager to fetch water and prepare breakfast. But as she neared the bank, her ears caught something strange. Not the steady hum of insects, but men's rowdy laughter, clapping, the sharp clash of liquor bottles. Naomi froze. At this hour, the swamp was usually silent. Fishermen only came once daylight broke. She pressed against a tree, peering through the mist. What she saw struck her dumb. At the center of a circle of men, tangled in a dripping net, was no catfish or water snake. It was a mermaid, just like the stories she had told her children. But this was no childish fantasy. She was a being of breathtaking beauty and pain, her green hair dripping, her golden scales glittering under the moon. Most striking of all was her rounded belly, the undeniable sign of a mother-to-be. The drunken fishermen showed no reverence. They roared with laughter, shouting of wealth, of blessings, of what the voodoo priest would pay for her. Naomi caught every word, her heart clenching. While they dreamed of riches, The mermaid's tear-filled eyes searched only the darkness straight toward where Naomi stood. In that instant, Naomi felt stripped bare. Years of abandonment and scorn rose up within her, the mermaid's cries echoing the sorrow she had buried. A being in chains, a mother pleading for the life of her unborn child. And Naomi knew she was facing a choice no one else could make. She could turn away, return to her weary life as before. But if she did, could she ever sleep again, with that cry still echoing in her heart? So, dear viewers, prepare yourselves for a mystical journey full of surprises where compassion has the power to reshape destiny. And before we continue with the heart of this story, don't forget to subscribe and like this video. Oh, and be sure to comment below where you're watching from. We'd love to know. The moon hung over Baton Rouge like a massive silver lantern, flooding the swamp with cold light. A thin mist clung to the water's surface, blurring the world into a painting of ink and shadow. Naomi, pressed against the trunk of an old tree, clutched the water jug on her head as if it were the only thing keeping her from collapsing. What she saw before her went far beyond any folktale her grandmother had ever told. In the drunken circle of men, the golden-scaled mermaid appeared like a blinding dream trapped in a nightmare. The scales on her tail caught the moonlight, flashing as if fragments of heaven itself were falling to earth. Her hair, long and flowing like a forest of green waterweed, clung to her tear-stained cheeks. And on that beautiful face, there was no trace of otherworldly pride, only raw, unshaken fear. The fishermen were delirious. One raised his fist, his hoarse voice bellowing, "A blessing has come." The others echoed, shouting wild promises, eyes shining more from greed than liquor. "A pregnant mermaid! The voodoo priest will pay in a lifetime of gold." They leapt and shouted like children who had struck a fortune, rum spilling from their gourds and splashing into the mud. Naomi saw one man stoop, trembling with delight as his filthy fingers brushed against the mermaid's tail. He burst into laughter, boasting as though he had laid hands on solid gold. Beneath the noise, Naomi heard something no one else cared to notice. The mermaid's faint sobs. They were not human nor animal, fragile, trembling like a broken flute in the night wind. The sound rose, then vanished, leaving behind an ache that hollowed the heart. Naomi's eyes blurred with tears. She thought of Malak and Micah, of mornings when they cried to run with the other children, only to collapse because their legs would not carry them. Of the pitying stares from neighbors, laced with cruel whispers. That pain, somehow, resonated inside the mermaid's sobs. Naomi tightened her grip on the jug, desperate for something to anchor her. A fleeting thought struck. If they sell her, maybe this town will grow rich. Maybe those who once looked down on me will scorn me less. But instantly, heat surged through her veins, the urge to scream that no one had the right to turn a mother's suffering into a bargaining chip. Moonlight struck the mermaid's swollen belly, making it glow like a burning orb. The sight cut into Naomi's mind, an innocent life shifting within, a child yet to see sunlight, already condemned. The men, lost in their drunken visions, began to argue. One insisted they should hold her until morning, take her straight to New Orleans to deliver to the priest. Another shouted back, demanding a larger share for himself. Their laughter tangled with curses, a storm of chaos in the swamp. In the shadows, Naomi gave a bitter, quiet laugh. These men were fighting over treasures they had not yet claimed, while the living treasure before them clung to her last breaths. The absurdity struck her like a cheap play staged for fools. Then the mermaid lifted her head. Her eyes wide, luminous, glistening with tears, swept across the darkness and found Naomi. In an instant, Naomi felt dragged to the bottom of the swamp. Those eyes carried everything, fear, pleading, and a fragile trust that someone would listen. She couldn't breathe. Her heart pounded against her ribs, ready to tear free. No one else noticed that gaze, But Naomi knew. The mermaid was looking at her, only her. And in that moment, a voice rose not through her ears, but from the depths of her mind. "Please save my child. Please save us." Naomi stumbled back, nearly dropping the jug. Her hands shook violently. Every part of her wanted to scream that she couldn't, that it was impossible. Yet the desperate plea coiled around her heart, tightening, refusing to let go. All around, the men kept dreaming aloud. One shouted, "I'll build a brick house. I'll buy land in town." Another, "I'll marry 3 wives, eat grilled fish every night, drink rum till I drop." Their laughter echoed across the swamp, blind and deaf to the truth that in the shadows a poor woman stood at the greatest crossroads of her life. Naomi drew a deep breath, fighting to steady herself. She knew what would happen if she was discovered. Banishment, the haunted forest, and what of her boys if she were cast out? But beneath the men's laughter, she could hear it clearly again, the faint breaking cry of a mother, the echo of her own heart. The night wind swept through the branches of the old oaks, carrying with it the stench of mud and palm liquor, brushing the back of Naomi's neck and making her shiver. But what truly made her heart leap to her throat was not the chill, it was those eyes. The eyes of the mermaid, bound tight to the oak, shining through tears and moonlight. Naomi stood frozen, her body locked, her breath caught in her throat. Everything around her, the shouting, the laughter, the clinking bottles blurred into a distant, muffled din. Only that gaze pierced through it all, pinning her in place. In an instant, Naomi heard something that was not sound, but like a current of wind seeping straight into her bones. "Do not abandon my child. Save this baby." She faltered. The jug on her head trembled, threatening to tumble down at any moment. She wanted to deny it, to tell herself it was only her grandmother's old stories haunting her mind. But it was too real, too sharp. It came not from her ears, but from the deepest part of her soul. Memories surged like a flood. She saw Malik and Micah curled up inside the cramped shack, their powerless legs unable to lift them. She saw them at the window, eyes heavy with sorrow as they watched other children run outside. And above it all, she heard again the slam of the door the day her husband left, leaving her alone against the world. That pain, the frail shadows of her sons, blended with the mermaid's weak sobs into a mournful music that nearly buckled Naomi's knees. Those eyes did not leave her. They carried no anger, no reproach. Only one thing, a plea, a desperate yet unyielding plea, as if both her life and the life inside her rested entirely on this moment. Naomi drew in a sharp breath. She knew she was no hero. Her whole life she had been nothing but a poor woman in a leaking shack, earning pennies from the fish market and hauling water. But in those eyes she saw herself a mother abandoned, a soul once begging with no one to hear. Cruel irony. While Naomi's heart trembled with empathy, the fishermen carried on with their drunken fun. One sprawled in the mud, waving his arms as he described the red brick castle he would build. Another stomped and shouted about the horse farm he would buy. Their laughter rang out bright and careless, making Naomi feel the whole scene bitter and absurd. She wanted to scream, "Are you blind? Do you not see a mother begging before you?" But her throat locked tight. The only voice now came from within her chest, not her lips. A single minute dragged like a century. Naomi felt her heartbeat pounding so hot it threatened to tear through her skin. The jug on her head weighed like stone, yet she dared not lower it, afraid even the smallest movement would give her away. The mermaid shuddered, her green hair plastered to her face. Her lips moved, though no sound escaped. Still, Naomi heard the echo. "Do not abandon my child. Please save us." Naomi turned her face away, eyes squeezed shut. She whispered inside her mind, as if to justify herself. "No, I can't. I have children. I can't risk my life." But even as the thought flickered, the image of Malik and Micah's powerless legs returned, merging with the sobs of the creature before her. The two visions overlapped until she could no longer tell memory from reality. A roar of laughter burst nearby, yanking Naomi back. She looked again. One man was poking the mermaid's swollen belly with a stick, just to hear her whimper. Naomi bit her lip until blood welled, and in that instant, a fire flared inside her, not born of courage, but of a mother's fury at seeing cruelty inflicted on another life. She knew that if she stepped forward, she would be branded a traitor to the village, cast out, perhaps even killed. But if she turned away, she would never escape those eyes haunting her nights. Naomi trembled as the question struck her. Is this the river testing me? Are the old stories true that one must choose between greed and compassion? And is that choice now laid before me? She swallowed hard, her breath unsteady. Her feet seemed rooted to the earth, yet her heart had already taken a step toward the oak where the mermaid was bound. Darkness spread like a heavy curtain over the Louisiana swamp. The moon hung low, casting a pale light that only deepened the mystery of the night, as if even nature itself held its breath. Naomi stood hidden in the shadows, cold sweat beading on her brow, her palms slick, her heart pounding like a war drum. She knew she was about to do something that could never be undone, an act that might destroy her life forever. Yet the mermaid's pleading eyes burned into her memory, bound together with the image of her twin boys lying helpless in their shack. In that moment, Naomi understood. She had no choice but to step forward. Behind her, drunken laughter and the clash of rum gourds rang out, drowning every other sound. The fisherman, lost in dreams of gold and power, paid no attention to the frail figure slipping quietly from her hiding place. Naomi moved slowly, each step as fragile as walking a tightrope. Her knees trembled with every thundering heartbeat, but her feet carried her closer to the oak tree where the mermaid was bound. At last, she knelt. Before her, the thick ropes bit deep into the mermaid's flesh, leaving raw, bleeding welts. The creature was exhausted, her breath ragged, her eyes closed, her lips moving silently in prayer. Naomi reached out with trembling hands, touching the knots. The cords were rough, cruelly tight, cutting her fingers until they bled as she pried at them. Sweat and iron-tasting blood slid down her tongue as she clenched her jaw. In her head, whispers swirled. If they catch you, you'll die. What will become of your boys? But louder still came another voice. Don't abandon her. This child needs you. Naomi chose to listen to the second voice. Her fingers shook violently, clumsy like a child learning to thread a needle. Each time the rope snapped back, her skin burned raw, but she didn't stop. Nails broke, blood welled, yet she pulled, she pried, loosening little by little. Sweat fell into the dirt, mixing with the mud. Time seemed to freeze, as if the whole world had narrowed to her hands and those merciless knots. Finally, the first rope slipped free. The mermaid shuddered, eyes flickering open with a faint spark of hope. Naomi pressed on. One knot, then another, until the last rope dropped with a muffled thud, swallowed by the men's laughter in the distance. The mermaid collapsed to the ground, her trembling arms struggling to hold her weight. Naomi caught her, feeling the cold slickness of her skin, the hot, shallow breaths against her shoulder. For a moment she thought, what am I doing? A poor, ragged woman clutching a mythical being like a thief in the night. The thought almost made her laugh bitter and mocking, aimed at fate itself. But there was no time to linger. Naomi heaved the mermaid up, guiding her away from the oak. Together they staggered, two shadows leaning on each other. Ahead, the forest loomed like a dark doorway opening wide. Behind them, the fishermen still drank and roared, oblivious. Every step was a gamble. Naomi could hear her heartbeat hammering, blending with the mermaid's labored breathing. Moonlight filtered through the trees, glinting on the narrow trail beneath them. Now and then, a twig snapped underfoot, and Naomi froze, holding her breath, terrified that even the faintest sound would unleash the beasts behind her. And yet, strangely, the night seemed to be on her side. Frogs croaked, crickets chirped, leaves rustled, all weaving together a cover of sound that hid their escape. As though the wilderness itself sheltered this reckless act. Only when the glow of the fisherman's fire had faded into a dim blur did Naomi finally exhale. The mermaid leaned fully against her shoulder, eyes half closed, her breathing shallow but steadier. Naomi tightened her grip and pressed forward into the woods. The swamp clutched at their feet, but she did not stop. For an instant, Naomi glanced up at the moon and wondered, "Am I rewriting my own destiny?" From a poor mother in a leaky shack, she had become a woman defying the laws of her village, daring the judgment of her whole community. But the fear inside her had been replaced by something else, a strange strength rising in her chest. For the first time in years, Naomi did not feel powerless. They walked until the fisherman's fire was nothing but a faint speck behind them. Naomi paused, pressing her ear against the mermaid's chest, catching the fragile rhythm of her heart. She smiled softly this time, not in bitterness, but in relief. Ahead, the forest stretched in endless shadow, a new trial waiting to unfold. Naomi knew the road ahead would be long and perilous. But one truth was certain. Tonight, she had chosen life over silence. Still, would this daring act truly free her and the mermaid, or would it awaken an even greater danger when the village discovered the mysterious disappearance? And now, dear viewers, pause for just a moment. Hit that subscribe button before we continue to the heart of the story, but only if you truly feel the weight of what I've shared. And drop a comment below to tell me where you're watching from and what time it is right now. It's always a joy to see people from every corner of the world joining us here. The night over Baton Rouge thinned toward its end, the moon tilting west, leaving behind a sky dotted with faint stars. Naomi guided the mermaid through winding forest paths, mud clinging to their feet, their breaths weaving into a trembling rhythm. When at last her shabby wooden shack appeared in the dim light, Naomi felt as though she herself had swum against a raging flood. The small hut, long accustomed to sheltering 3 weary souls, now carried a secret larger than fate itself. Naomi pushed the door open, the hinges squealing in the silence like a warning. She quickly shut it, fumbling with the wooden latch, her heart still racing, unable to believe she had just smuggled a mythical being across her threshold. The mermaid collapsed onto the ragged mat in the corner. Her drenched skin had turned pale, her golden tail once glistening beneath the moon now dulled with exhaustion. Her body shook violently, fragile as if the slightest breeze might topple her. Naomi hurried to cover her with a thin blanket, but it was too small, unable to hide the shivering shoulders beneath. From the kitchen corner, Naomi fetched a bowl of thin corn gruel, left from supper, little more than water, a few kernels, and coarse salt. A meal so poor, even a stray dog might turn away. Yet when Naomi placed it before her, the mermaid's eyes lit as if she had been offered treasure. With trembling hands, she lifted the spoon, swallowing slowly, each mouthful reverent, as though it were grace itself. Naomi sat in silence, watching. No words were spoken, but in the mermaid's gaze, Naomi saw gratitude vast, wordless, undeniable. Her heart clenched. For a fleeting moment, she saw the same look Malik and Micah had given her when she first taught them to eat from a tiny wooden spoon. Pure trust, simple yet profound. The warmth vanished quickly, replaced by the cold press of fear. Naomi knew well. Soon the village would notice the mermaid's disappearance. The men would return, perhaps the moment their liquor ran dry. And the ancient laws of Baton Rouge, never forgave those who hid a creature of the river. In her mind, she heard the imagined beat of the village drum. The traitor shall be cast into the haunted forest, never to return. The vision alone sent cold sweat racing down her spine. She looked at her sleeping sons, their small cheeks rising and falling in steady rhythm. Innocent, unaware that the home around them now hid a secret that could shatter all their lives. Naomi stroked their hair, then turned to the mermaid leaning weakly against the wall, her bowl half empty. The image struck Naomi's chest. 3 fragile lives under one crumbling roof. Outside, the wind tore through the trees. The night seemed to grow heavier, pressing down like a suffocating blanket. Yet within the hut, a faint glow lingered, the light of connection, of the choice Naomi had embraced. Danger loomed, but a thread of peace steadied her heart. She sat still, gazing through the crack in the wooden door where the last silver light lingered. Sometimes she smirked bitterly at herself. Naomi, you must be the boldest fool in the South. While others beg for blessings from the spirits, you've carried one straight into your house. The thought almost made her laugh thin humor against the weight of fate. The mermaid finished her bowl, set it aside, and closed her eyes. Her breathing evened, calmer than before. Naomi pulled the blanket closer, whispering softly, though she knew the mermaid might not hear. Sleep now, tomorrow we'll see. Yet in her chest the question lingered. Will there even be a tomorrow to see? The swamp's chorus of insects swelled louder, as if heralding what was to come. Naomi leaned against the wall, her back aching, but she did not close her eyes. Sleep was a luxury she could not afford. At any moment, guards could break down the door, or the fishermen could return. Her little house had become a battlefield in silence, and she its only sentry. Time seemed suspended. Every sound magnified, the mermaid's breaths, the faint snores of her children, Naomi's heartbeat drumming like a festival drum. Each beat a question unanswered. How long can I keep this secret? Can I shield 3 fragile lives from the fury of the village? Naomi clenched her fists. Deep down, she knew the answers mattered less than her resolve. For the first time, she no longer felt like a forsaken mother in poverty. She was the guardian of life itself, no matter how small, no matter how fragile. The drums thundered at dawn, echoing across the weathered wooden roofs of Baton Rouge, pounding like thunder inside every chest. Each beat was urgent, relentless, like a curse hammering on every door. Villagers poured into the streets, eyes still heavy with sleep but hearts trembling. The elders' men stood in the dirt square, voices rasping, cutting through the air. Whoever dares hide the mermaid will be cast into the haunted forest, never to return. The sound split the already heavy air. Murmurs spread through the crowd, suspicion thick in every glance. Neighbors eyed each other warily, as if anyone might be the betrayer. Old women clung to one another, whispering of ancient curses. Children squeezed their mothers' hands in fear, and even the toughest men shifted uneasily, torn between greed and dread. Inside a shack on the village's edge, Naomi froze. She pressed her back to the wall, straining to hear every drumbeat, every word. Her throat was dry as ash. On the ragged mat lay the mermaid, her rounded belly rising and falling with labored breaths. A thin shaft of light slipped through the door crack, striking her darkened golden scales so that they flickered like a dying flame. Naomi knew they would come soon. Suddenly, pounding on the door shattered the silence. Naomi jolted, her heart nearly leaping from her chest. The twins still slept soundly, breathing evenly, but the mermaid stiffened, eyes wide with fear. Naomi gestured for her to stay still, then forced her trembling legs to carry her to the door. On the porch stood her gossiping neighbor, the sharp-tongued woman whose mouth never rested. Her eyes darted around like sparrows hunting grain. "Naomi," she barked, hands on hips, "why haven't you come out this morning? Everyone's already gathered in the square." Naomi forced a calm voice, blocking the doorway with her body. "I've been busy with the boys. Haven't had a chance yet." A strained smile tugged at her lips, but her hand gripped the doorframe so hard it shook. The neighbor leaned sideways, trying to peer past her. "What are you hiding in there? They say the mermaid's gone." "Maybe?" She lowered her voice, sly and poisonous. "Maybe someone in the village dared bring her home." Sweat trickled down Naomi's neck. She held her smile, shaking her head firmly. "You know me, I'd never dare. I'm too poor to even care for myself." A tense silence stretched between them. Then the woman gave a dry laugh, sniffed, and said, "I believe you." But Naomi, truth always finds its way out. With that, she turned, her long skirt dragging dust as she disappeared down the path. Naomi shut the door, sliding down its rough surface, gasping for air. Her eyes turned to the corner. The mermaid still lay there, frail hand resting on her swollen belly, eyes half closed, breath steady. Naomi pressed her palm to her chest, feeling her heart slam wildly. The truth hit her with full force. Tonight, the mermaid must return to the river. Every extra moment, she stayed only sharpened the danger, not just for Naomi, but for her boys. The village would not forgive. The haunted forest would not forgive. And her own conscience would never forgive if the secret was uncovered. She rose, pulling the blanket higher over the mermaid's shoulders. The creature's eyes fluttered open for a moment. No words, only a silent gaze that carried entire worlds. Gratitude, fear, fragile hope. Naomi gave a small nod, a promise spoken without sound. Outside, the drums rose again, louder, faster, rolling through Baton Rouge with a fury the town had never felt. Suspicions spread like fog. Every home was a secret. Every family, a locked box that might conceal betrayal. In her shack, Naomi sat pressed against the door, eyes fixed on the narrow crack. Shadows moved outside, boots crunching on dirt, dogs barking sharp in the distance. Any second, the pounding could return, and next time it wouldn't be just the gossipy neighbor. Naomi closed her eyes, drawing a deep breath. She knew there was only one path left. Before dawn broke again, the mermaid must be taken back to the water. Tonight would be the greatest gamble of her life. But could Naomi slip her out of Baton Rouge alive when the whole village was watching and the hunt drew closer with every passing hour? Night fell heavy as velvet, wrapping Baton Rouge in its embrace. Outside, crickets whispered and frogs called across the distant swamp. Inside the hut, Naomi pulled on a thin shawl, then gently helped the mermaid to her feet. No words, no wasted sound, only their eyes met, a silent understanding between two souls who had just weathered the same storm. The road to the Mississippi that night stretched longer than any journey Naomi had ever known. The wind carried the scent of mud and wildflowers, rustling through the thick trees. Their shadows stretched long across the earth, trembling in moonlight. With every step, Naomi's heart tightened, afraid of being caught, afraid she would never see this wondrous creature again. At the riverbank, the world opened wide, magnificent and still. The full moon bathed the Mississippi in silver, its surface gleaming like a giant mirror spilling into the horizon. Gentle waves tapped against the sand, like the breath of some vast living being. Naomi stood breathless, feeling as though the river itself was watching, waiting. The mermaid tilted her head, her long hair falling forward, glinting emerald beneath the moon. Her eyes glowed soft, yet filled with the sorrow of a mother leaving home. Naomi shivered not from the wind, but from the holiness of the moment. Then the mermaid lifted her hand to her hair. With slender fingers, she cut a single golden strand, shining like sunlight trapped in midnight. It shimmered faintly, alive with its own spirit. She placed it into Naomi's hand, closing Naomi's fingers around it. "Keep it under your pillow, tell no one." she whispered, her voice like water sliding over stones. "The river will remember your kindness." Naomi froze, her hands trembling around the strand. Its weight was not in the hair itself, but in the promise bound to it, a bond eternal between two worlds. Tears stung her eyes. She wanted to speak, but her throat closed tight. The mermaid smiled, fragile, yet brighter than the moon. She turned, stepping into the river. As the water touched her, her tail flared into light, blazing like 1,000 tiny lamps. Gold rippled across the surface, turning the Mississippi into a fallen galaxy. Naomi clutched the strand to her chest, watching every graceful motion. The mermaid glided away, each sweep of her tail trailing brilliance. Then her glow dimmed, her figure dissolving beneath the waves, leaving the river to settle once more in silence. The shore returned to stillness. Naomi stood alone, her heart pounding with loss, relief, and fear of what tomorrow would bring. She knew she had risked everything, and now fate was no longer hers to hold. She pressed the strand to her heart, whispering, "May the river keep its word." Turning back, she walked the old path. The moon still hung above, but now its light seemed to guide her own way. Each step felt lighter, as if she had laid down a burden too heavy to bear. Yet within her glimmered hope that this small gift might carry a miracle for her boys. Back in the hut, Malik and Micah slept soundly, smiles faint across their dreaming lips. Naomi slipped the golden strand beneath her pillow, just as she was told. For a fleeting moment, warmth pulsed through her palm, like the river itself sealing its secret promise. Naomi closed her eyes, weary but at peace. Tomorrow was uncertain, the village's wrath, the elders' judgment, the doubt of all who feared the river's magic. But tonight, she had done what was right. And sometimes, that alone was enough to keep living. So then, my dear audience, if you find this story stirring, drop a comment with the number 1, or simply write, "I'm still here," so we know you're listening and ready to continue. 7 days had passed since the night Naomi led the mermaid back to the Mississippi. 7 days in which her spirit wavered between fear and hope. Each evening before sleep, she placed the strand of golden hair beneath her pillow, touching it lightly like a silent prayer. But this morning, Naomi awoke not to drums or knocking at her door, but to something miraculous, the sound of children's laughter. It rang out bright and clear, like dew dripping into the river. Naomi's eyes flew open. In the pale dawn light of the shack, she saw the vision she had only dared to dream of for 7 long years. Malik and Micah were standing beside her bed. Their tiny legs, lifeless since birth, now trembled yet held firm. Arms stretched wide, eyes glittering, voices calling out, "Mom! Mom!" The moment struck Naomi like a wave of joy too heavy to bear. Tears burst free, streaming down her face. She rushed forward, wrapping them in her arms, feeling their breath, their racing hearts, the vibrant life within their small bodies. Their first steps were a miracle, a gift worth her entire life's devotion. All 3 toppled onto the ragged mat, laughter and sobs tumbling together. Malik staggered, clutching her hand, while Micah bounced awkwardly, his little feet pounding against the wooden floor. The shack, once dark and burdened, suddenly blazed with joy. The sound spilled beyond the walls. Neighbors gathered, pressing close, their curious eyes peering in. When they saw the children standing, smiling, laughter ringing, the village froze in shock. Then whispers rose, spreading like fire in dry grass. "Naomi's boys, they can walk!" "It's impossible. The river spirit has blessed her." The people of Baton Rouge, long steeped in shadows and tales of curses, now witnessed a miracle with their own eyes. Pity and scorn once cast on Naomi twisted into awe and even envy. Naomi could scarcely believe it herself. She clutched her sons, her heart racing. Deep inside, She knew the miracle was no accident. It was born from that reckless night, from the golden strand glowing still beneath her pillow, and most of all, from the compassion she had shown to a helpless soul the world had rejected. The village elder soon arrived. He watched the boys stumble and leap, his eyes caught between suspicion and wonder. Behind him, voices whispered, "It is a sign. The river has chosen Naomi." The elder frowned but sighed. Some truths defied law and power, undeniable in their presence. Naomi stood, head bowed, arms wrapped around her children, but her eyes shone brighter than ever. Years of abandonment, years of shame, all answered now by the justice of the river. Justice that needed no drumbeat, no proclamation. It lived in the laughter of her sons. The villagers clapped her back, congratulated, murmured, "Naomi is blessed by the spirits. Her whole line will prosper." But Naomi only smiled softly. In her heart, she knew the true miracle was not fortune, but salvation. All day, Malik and Micah ran and stumbled about, their steps clumsy but their eyes glowing. The village children gathered, curious and excited, pulling them into games. Naomi watched, her chest swelling with faith. The future had changed. These first steps were the beginning of a new chapter. That night, when the noise had faded, Naomi sat alone. She pulled the golden strand from beneath her pillow, resting it in her hand. Its faint glow pulsed softly, like the heartbeat of the river. Naomi whispered, "Thank you. I will never forget." She understood. The gift was not only for her, but a reminder that even the smallest act of kindness carried the power to reshape destiny. But every miracle carries a price. And as children's laughter spread through the village, was there already some hidden hand, in the shadows, watching with envy and intent? That morning in New Orleans was unusually radiant. Golden sunlight spilled across the cobblestone streets, where the scent of coffee mingled with the smooth rise of jazz. At her small stall in the French market, Naomi's hands moved swiftly, arranging baskets of fruit and corn. A gentle smile rested on her face, calm, at ease. The days of hauling water and struggling in Baton Rouge had faded into a distant memory. People in the market greeted her with respect. No longer did they see Naomi as the poor woman burdened with two sickly children. Now she was spoken of with admiration, the steadfast mother, blessed by the river spirit. They believed that the bright eyes and ringing laughter of the twins, Malik and Micah, were living proof of that blessing. The boys darted through the crowd, playing with other children. Their laughter carried far like joyful drumbeats, blending with the saxophone's song from the corner of the street. Naomi watched them, her heart swelling with happiness. Each step they took, each cry of "Mama," was a golden thread mending the heart once torn apart inside her. Naomi's work flourished. People came not only to buy, but to see her smile, to believe that miracles could live among the ordinary. She was not rich, but she was provided for, and to her, that was a fortune greater than gold. Then one afternoon, the past returned. In the crowd at the market, a familiar figure appeared. The man who had abandoned her, her former husband, stepped forward. The arrogance once etched into his face was gone, replaced by eyes heavy with tears and hesitation. He knelt before her, in front of everyone, begging Naomi for forgiveness. For a heartbeat, silence gripped the market. Vendors, customers, even the children held their breath. Naomi stood still, her chest pierced by the flood of memory. The night she was left alone, the days of toil, the nights weeping over her boys. But then her gaze fell upon Malik and Micah, two children holding hands, looking at their father with innocence untouched by bitterness. Naomi exhaled a long sigh. Compassion prevailed. She reached out and lifted the man to his feet. No accusations, no reopening of old wounds. Forgiveness came not because he deserved it, but because her heart had grown too large to be chained by shadows. From that day forward, their family was whole again. The man, no longer a runaway, worked beside Naomi at the market, helped guide the children to school. Though clumsy with guilt, his every action carried a quiet resolve to make amends. Naomi did not forget the past, but she chose to shape it into a lesson for their future. She knew in her soul, all this change had begun that night. She freed the golden-scaled mermaid. From the moment she heard the silent plea, from the instant her trembling fingers loosened the knots of rope, the strand of golden hair beneath her pillow still glowed faintly, a sacred flame reminding her that kindness could rewrite destiny. Years later, as they walked the banks of the Mississippi, Naomi often told her children the story of courage, of a single decision in the dark that had transformed their lives. Malik and Micah grew up believing that no matter how harsh the world, compassion could always summon miracles. New Orleans pulsed with jazz and festival lights, but in Naomi's heart, the greatest miracle was not the music or the glow, it was the laughter of her children. And somewhere, beneath the Mississippi's waves, the mermaid surely remembered her promise. The river does not forget human kindness. On quiet nights in New Orleans, when the city had fallen asleep beneath jazz and golden street lamps, Naomi often woke to the faintest sound like water tapping against an invisible oar. At times, she thought she heard whispers drifting from the Mississippi. Whether it was wind, waves, or a call from somewhere deeper, she could never be sure. Among the Gullah Geechee, there was an old saying, "The river never forgets kindness. When you save a life, blessings will come." Like water overflowing the marsh. Naomi had once heard those words from an old woman at the French market, and now they returned to her mind each time she watched her sons laugh. Malik and Micah had grown like bamboo after rain, racing across the brick courtyards, mischief so lively it made neighbors chuckle. People said the river's strength lived in them, that their eyes shone like moonlight on water. Naomi only smiled, but deep inside, she knew those words were not mere rumor. Beneath her pillow, the golden strand still rested. Each time her fingers brushed it, warmth spread through her like the river's own heartbeat. She had never told anyone, not her husband, not even her sons. The secret was the thread that bound her to that fateful night, and she believed that if spoken aloud, the miracle would vanish. Yet something unreadable always flickered in Naomi's eyes. At times, while selling at the French market, she would stare off toward Baton Rouge. There, the fisherman who had once bound the mermaid to the oak still lived, and the elder who had commanded the search of every home had never accepted that the creature vanished without trace. He still believed someone had hidden her. One day, truth might come to light. On certain nights, Naomi dreamed of the mermaid swimming beneath golden waves, her belly grown larger, her eyes filled with hope. But the dream would twist into the thunder of the elders' drums, the shouts of the fishermen, and Naomi would wake, cold sweat streaming down her brow. In the Gullah Geechee tradition, the elders told stories like seeds planted in young minds. One evening by the fire, a blind old man rasped, "There are secrets that cannot stay buried. If the river remembers, people will find a way to unearth them." The young ones laughed, but Naomi felt her chest tighten. Day by day, the peace of her New Orleans home was shadowed by a question. How long would the golden strand's power last? Was it only a fleeting blessing or the beginning of another trial, fiercer than the last? One morning, as the sun blazed red above the Mississippi, Naomi pressed her hand to her chest and whispered into the wind, "I have kept my promise, never spoken a word, but will I be strong enough to guard this forever?" No one knew the answer. Yet the river flowed on, serene and mighty, holding within it countless untold stories. Naomi continued to live, to love, to forgive, but deep within her, a quiet intuition stirred. The legend was not finished. And when her sons grew older, when whispers hardened into obsession within the community, Naomi would face another choice. this time not for herself alone, but for the generations yet to come. The tale of the golden-scaled mermaid, the shining strand of hair, and the river's promise was only the first chapter in a long book titled Echoes of the Mississippi. And so, from one dark night on the banks of the Mississippi, Naomi's story gave birth to a miracle no one could have foreseen. From a woman abandoned, struggling to survive in a riverside shack, she dared to reach out and save a life the whole village had condemned as a sacrifice. That choice not only changed the fate of the golden-scaled mermaid, but rewrote the destiny of her own life and that of her two sons. Malik and Micah rose to their feet, their laughter ringing far, proof that kindness is never lost. Naomi gained respect, recognition, and most of all, healing from the wounds she had carried so long. Yet beneath all the miracles and joy, the secret of the radiant golden strand still lay hidden beneath her pillow, a reminder that every blessing comes with a price. The lesson here is simple, yet powerful. When you choose compassion instead of turning away, the world itself can change. Courage is not always about defeating someone, it can be standing up for another when no one else will. And just as the Mississippi flows without end, small acts of kindness leave echoes that ripple far beyond a single lifetime. But questions remain. Did the elder of Baton Rouge truly believe the mermaid had vanished? Will the golden strand continue to protect Naomi and her family, or open the door to an even greater trial ahead? Perhaps this was only the first chapter of the legend. Now, I want to hear from you, my dear audience. What lesson do you take from Naomi's journey? Do you believe kindness always returns, just as the river never forgets? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you'd like me to continue with part 2 of this story, let me know clearly. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our inspiring stories. And tell me too, where are you watching from and what time is it right now? It's incredible that we can gather here from every corner of the world to listen together to the endless whispers of the river.